So you're interested in even more weird deaths? Well, this is part 3 of this series, so if you haven't checked them out yet, part 1 and 2 are linked below to watch. And please give me a like if you like what I'm doing, and I'll probably just keep covering every single death at this point because there's always a story behind everything. So jumping right in, we're starting this list with Richard I, also known as Richard the Lionheart. He died in 1199. And I covered his life in an early video about how he got this nickname, but let's just say he was a big fan of crusading and getting involved in a few scrapes. It was during a battle besieging a castle in France that Richard was shot by a crossbow in the shoulder. The story goes that as he lay dying, he sent for the archer who had shot him. The archer named Bertram came to his bedside as Richard gave him 100 shillings and allowed him to walk free. Some sources say that despite this pardon, the archer was still captured, flayed alive, and then hanged for good measure. King Richard eventually died from the infection of the wound at 41 years old. This next one is very Game of Thrones, or so it is claimed. Edmund Ironside was king at a very tumultuous time in England's history, the period of Viking invasions. He was Ethelred the Unready's son, and when his father died, he was supported by a good number of the council, but was never able to gain large enough support. Canute, the Danish king, threatened his rule, though Edmund put up a fair fight, retaining London and Wessex. They met in battle, but agreed to partition the kingdoms, the northeast and the southwest. This agreement was known as the Treaty of Alnay, and would hold until the pair died. Suspiciously, just 1 month later, Edmund met his end on the 30th of November, 1016. Because very little contemporary records mention it, this is thought to have been a sudden death. However, he was a young and healthy man, nothing to indicate that this was natural. It is said that he was killed by an assassin sent by Edric Striona, one of his own earls who had a history of betraying him, and the rumour has since spread that he was murdered during the night on a toilet. This only appears at its earliest in 1120s, written by Henry of Huntingdon. He wrote that King Edmund was treacherously slain a few days afterwards. Thus it happened one night, this great and powerful king, having occasion to retire to the house for receiving the calls of nature, the son of the elderman Edric, by his father's contrivance, concealed himself in the pit, and stabbed the king twice from beneath with a sharp dagger, and leaving the weapon fixed in his bowels, made his escape. A lot of questions arise from this account, certainly the main one being, how come no one ever mentioned this until 100 years later? A more reasonable explanation would be a death from more natural causes, like an unhealed wound or something that they couldn't have understood properly in those times. After his death, Canute was able to become sole ruler over England. Surprisingly, no contemporaries or later writers accused Canute of plotting the murder. In fact, many noted that Canute thought of Edmund as a brother, after the agreement to divide the nation. He visited his grave on the anniversary of his death, and even killed Edric, who had betrayed Edmund in battles years earlier. Again, nothing can be certain, but Edmund's story is one of mystery and intrigue. No wonder it ended up inspiring a Game of Thrones plot. Now this leads me directly to the next death of a monarch, and that would be King George II, who did die on the loo, albeit a little less dramatised. He died on October 25th, 1760, from an aortic dissection. We have a first-hand account with Horace Walpole's memoirs, in which he wrote, King George rose as usual at 6 and drank his chocolate, for all his actions were invariably methodic. 7:15 he went into a little closet. His German valet de chambre in waiting heard a noise, and running in found the king dead on the floor. He was 77 years old and was the oldest living monarch at this time. Now, many people know of Edward VIII's abdication, but not many know that he wasn't the first king to do so. Edward II married Queen Isabella from France. He was less than a capable ruler and did a lot to divide people. Their marriage became hostile, and Isabella left for Paris and began plotting with her lover Roger Mortimer to depose Edward and place their young son Edward on the throne instead. She led an invasion in 1326. London and its mobs rose against his government, and on the 2nd of October he was forced out of the city. Edward was captured, and though he still was king, he was held with no political power and was still legally married to Queen Isabella. Parliament held a meeting and listened to the growing protest against him and agreed he was unfit to rule. A delegation met with Edward at Kenilworth Castle, and they let him know that if he were to resign as monarch, his son Edward would succeed him. But if he did not, his son would be disinherited as well, and the crown was given to an alternate candidate. So Edward agreed, and on the 21st of January, he abdicated the throne in favour of his son. Edward was now known as Edward of Caernarvon. We now know he was locked up in Berkeley Castle, however he was never seen again, and there has been speculation about his death and probable murder. One theory is that the murder occurred on September of 1327. Wild rumours say that the event involved an unspeakable act involving a hot poker. This is according to Lord Berkeley's letters and King Edward III's letters referring to the death. However, doubt has been circulating of these facts, with some historians thinking that he may have lived until 1330. Not that this makes the rumours of his weird death any less interesting. Another speculation is that since Edward III failed to prosecute Sir John Maltravers, who was in charge of keeping his father safe, perhaps he was involved and the cover-up of Edward II's death was in fact all too convenient. Getting the new king on the throne was supported by most of the population, but everyone still feared the unrest brought about by having the ex-king still alive. However, despite these new allegations, a public funeral was held, and so Edward II did officially die, and he was murdered. By whom and how remains a mystery. And there we have our third instalment of Weird Deaths. Leave your suggestions below, and at this point I'm willing to extend the parameters, maybe just to other members of the royal family and maybe just other famous people from history. We'll have to see if your suggestions are weird enough. Don't forget to subscribe and so you don't miss it. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.